I want to welcome back to Crush Talk, where we just get into these messy internet dramas.
That's right.
And today, we are diving into this Reddit post that is just causing a huge buzz online.
Yeah.
It's a real, am I the asshole?
Yeah.
Situation, but it's also
That's so
just
interesting.
like, what?
Yeah, it's just a
Swift.
cardigan.
Yeah.
How does this even...
It just, brings up all these questions about, kindness boundaries and how we deal with, complicated situations.
Right. And that's what I think is so fascinating about this deep dive. It shows us how people are, when you have fandom, when you have social pressure, and then you have, the dynamic of, a student and adult.
Yeah, like a teenager and an adult.
How does that all play into this?
Okay, so let's set the scene for our listeners.
Okay.
We've got a high school junior, and she's, the definition of involved, cheerleading student government.
Wow.
Peer mentoring for students with disabilities.
Okay, busy.
She does it all.
Yeah.
Oh, and she works part-time at a cafe.
Oh, my goodness.
So she's a busy...
High achiever, for sure, dedicated to her school and her community.
Yeah.
Important to know this because this is all going to play into, how she sees this.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
And in her post, she mentions that she's a diehard Swiftie.
Okay.
So for the school's Ugly Sweater Day...
I love it.
She wears her Speak Now Taylor Swift cardigan.
Okay.
The one with all the sparkly purple sequins?
Yeah.
So she's I don't really think this is ugly, but it's definitely unique.
It's definitely unique. I can see how that would be meaningful to her.
Totally.
Connecting to her fandom.
Yeah, and she even says in the post that, this was a purchase that meant a lot to her. So already we can see how this item, it holds this significance for her.
Right. It's not just a sweater.
Yeah.
It's something more.
Exactly.
Oh.
So here's where things take a turn. Another student, a girl with Down syndrome who also loves Taylor Swift, sees the cardigan, on social media. And her mother messages our original poster directly asking if she can have the cardigan for her daughter.
Oh, wow.
So that initial request right there, already is making people...
Right. Is it even okay to ask for that?
Yeah. And is it appropriate to ask someone, especially a teenager, for a personal possession?
Right. And especially something that's connected to a fandom or something that they worked for or achieved.
Yeah. And remember, this wasn't just any sweater like our poster. She worked all summer to save up for this cardigan.
This Yeah.
This was a big purchase for her.
Yeah.
And it holds a lot of sentimental value for her.
Yeah.
So she politely declines the request. And she's this cardigan is very special to me and it's not even available in stores anymore.
Right. And she's acknowledging the request, but she's also hey, this is mine.
Yeah.
This is important to me.
Yeah. Her response is thoughtful and reasonable.
Yeah.
But hold on, Crush Talk listeners, because here we go.
Things are about to get.
This is where it gets good.
Really complicated. Okay, so the mother doesn't just take no for an answer.
Oh.
And she accuses our poster of being ableist.
Oh, wow.
And then to make matters worse, the school's cheerleading coach gets involved.
What?
And she pressures her to apologize and hand over the cardigan.
Oh, my goodness.
And the coach even tells her it's her duty as a cheerleader and a student leader to make this sacrifice.
It's hold on a second. We got adults here in positions of authority.
Yeah.
And they're pressuring a teenager to give up her stuff.
Yeah. This is where the power dynamics really come into play.
Yeah.
You have these adults in these positions of authority, and they're putting all this pressure on this teenager to, give up her property.
And what's a teenager supposed to do?
Yeah. And it's
Well,
she's in this position where if she doesn't do what these adults are telling her to do, there could be consequences for her.
Totally. Yeah.
And it gets even crazier.
She's then suddenly removed from the peer mentoring program.
What?
With no explanation.
Without any explanation.
Yeah.
So now it's hold on a second. Is the school really
Yeah.
thinking about this student's well-being, or are they just trying to cover their butts?
Yeah. Are they trying to avoid bad PR or appease this parent?
Yeah.
It just brings up so many questions.
Right.
Is it really ableist to not want to give away something you worked hard for?
Yeah.
Could this mother's request have been influenced by her daughter's disability?
Yeah.
And where do we draw the line between being kind and setting healthy boundaries?
Totally.
And why is the school even involved in a dispute over a cardigan?
Yeah, this is a lot.
What is going on?
Yeah.
And these are all valid questions. And when you look online, The response to this whole situation shows how much these questions resonate with people.
Absolutely.
The Reddit thread is full of comments from people who are outraged by the mother and the coach's actions.
Yeah, like seeing it as an abuse of power and a violation of this girl's rights.
Yeah, like who are these adults to decide what this student should do with her own stuff?
Right.
So stay tuned to Crush Talk, because we're going to dive into those Reddit comments and we're going to uncover all the different perspectives in this like tangled web of a story.
I'm ready. Let's do it. Welcome back to Crush Talk.
We are like in the thick of it now, dissecting this Reddit post that has just stirred up so many opinions.
Oh, yeah.
And honestly, reading through the comments, I was like blown away by just like the range of perspectives.
Oh.
It's like this whole cardigan situation like exposed this fault line in our like social dynamics.
Yeah.
And brought up all these questions about like how we treat each other and what's even considered like okay behavior.
You're so right. And one of the most common reactions we see in these comments is just like outrage at the mom and at the coach. Like
Yeah.
so many people felt that their actions were just like overstepping boundaries and using their authority to pressure this student to do something she clearly did not want to do.
You know, one commenter said it perfectly, and I'm just going to quote this because it was so good.
Yeah.
They said, "This isn't about a cardigan. This is about adults bullying a kid into submission."
Wow.
And I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Like, that's exactly it.
That's it.
And so many other people were saying the same thing. It's
Yeah.
like they saw this as like this microcosm of how these power imbalances like play out in real life.
And that is so interesting that you bring that up, because this whole like power dynamic thing is so central to understanding this whole situation. You know, you have this teenager who's already dealing with all the social pressures of high school, and then she's being confronted by these adults who have all this authority
Yeah.
in the school environment.
Yeah,
So she's automatically at a disadvantage.
totally.
And it makes it so much harder for her to like say no
Yeah.
without being scared of what's going to happen.
Yeah, and it's not just the coach.
Right.
Like a lot of people were really disturbed by the mom's behavior too.
Yeah, like they felt that she was like inappropriately using her daughter's disability to try to get what she wanted.
That's a really, really important point.
Yeah.
Because it's so important to advocate for people with disabilities,
Right.
for them to feel included.
Yeah.
But we also have to make sure that doesn't turn into entitlement
Right.
or manipulation.
Yeah. And some commenters were even worried that this kind of behavior could actually hurt the cause of disability advocacy.
Right.
Because it reinforces those like negative stereotypes
Yeah.
or like creates resentment. They felt that like true inclusion is about creating a level playing field, not like expecting special treatment or using a disability to get what you want.
Right. It's about treating everyone with respect
Yes.
and dignity.
Yes.
No matter their abilities or disabilities.
Exactly.
It has to be equal.
And we can't forget about the school's role in all of this.
Oh, yeah.
Like, a lot of commenters felt that the school's decision to remove her from the peer mentoring program was just, like, completely out of line.
Yeah. And maybe motivated by like wanting to avoid bad publicity
Right.
or just trying to appease this parent.
Yeah. Or just, like, not wanting to deal with it.
Yeah.
Let's just get rid of her, problem solved.
Yeah, exactly.
But that raises so many questions about, like, what the school's responsibility is in this.
Yeah.
And are they really thinking about all the students involved, or are they just protecting themselves?
Yeah, it's almost like they were trying to sweep the whole thing under the rug.
Yeah.
Instead of like dealing with it.
And talking about it.
Yeah.
Like, this could have been such a good learning moment for everyone involved.
Yeah.
A chance to have real conversations about, like, you know,
Yeah.
what are our boundaries?
Yeah.
How do we show empathy?
Yeah.
How do we communicate respectfully?
Right. What if instead of all these like pressure tactics, the mom had just like approached the student differently?
Right.
You know, maybe like explain her daughter's love for Taylor Swift
Yeah.
and just asked if there were other ways to make her happy.
Right. Or what if the coach?
Instead of like giving her an ultimatum,
Right.
just had a conversation where both students felt like they were being heard
Yeah.
and respected.
Exactly.
Like it all comes back to communication.
Yeah, like that whole thing, assume good intentions.
Right.
Like maybe everyone was trying to do the right thing, but they just didn't communicate well.
Right. And they didn't really understand each other.
Yeah.
And that's something I think we can all learn from, you know.
Totally.
When you're dealing with a tough situation, communication is key.
Yes.
So don't be afraid to say what you're feeling.
Yeah.
Set those boundaries.
Yeah.
And if something doesn't feel right, ask for clarification.
Yes.
And sometimes the best way to deal with a conflict is to just take a step back,
Yeah.
listen,
Yeah.
and try to understand where the other person is coming from.
So much wisdom.
A little bit.
Like that is amazing advice.
You got it. We'll be right back on Crush Talk after a quick word from our sponsors. Don't go anywhere. And we're back on Crush Talks, still kind of like untangling this whole Taylor Swift cardigan thing. And before the break, we were talking about like communication and how like not understanding each other can cause all these problems.
Right. It's easy to just like get caught up in your feelings and just assume things about people. But if you just take a second and try to see it from their side, it can really help you like figure things out and like have more empathy.
Totally. So let's like shift gears a little bit and talk about like the psychology behind why this cardigan became such a big deal.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier this idea of like object attachment.
Yes.
Can you explain like what that is and how it relates to all of this?
Yeah. So object attachment is basically like this emotional bond that we form with our stuff.
Okay.
And sometimes it's not even about the object itself, you know? Like it can hold memories, it can symbolize things we've done, or even like parts of who we are.
So like in this situation, the cardigan wasn't just a sweater to this girl.
Right.
Like it represented all her hard work.
Yeah.
Her love for Taylor Swift.
Totally.
Maybe even like her identity.
Exactly. So asking her to give it away wasn't just about the cardigan. It was like asking her to give up a part of herself.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
It's like when you have like a favorite toy from when you were a kid.
Right.
And you just can't get rid of it.
Yes, even though it's been in a box for like 20 years.
Exactly. It's not about the toy.
It's the memories.
It's about the memories.
The feelings.
Yeah.
Like a time machine.
Okay, so how can we like use this idea of object attachment to like deal with situations like the one we're talking about?
Well, I think it just reminds us to be more aware of like how much other people's things mean to them.
Yeah.
Like even if it seems like nothing to us, it could be really important to someone else.
So instead of like judging someone for being attached to something, we should try to like understand why.
Exactly. Like what's the story behind it? Right.
You know, and when you're asking someone for something, you're talking about their stuff, you got to be careful.
Yeah.
Be respectful.
Yeah.
Try to see it from their point of view.
And maybe like sometimes it's just better to not ask for something that's really personal.
Yeah. Just admire it from afar.
Yeah.
And appreciate that it brings them joy.
Okay. So as we wrap up this deep dive on Crush Talk, what are some like key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think this whole story just reminds us that every time we talk to someone, it's a chance to like understand them better.
Okay.
So like before you judge someone or assume something, try to see it from their side.
Yeah.
Think about like who has more power in the situation.
Yeah.
How your words and actions could affect them.
And remember, objects can mean a lot to people.
Yes.
Be respectful of their boundaries, even if you don't get it.
Even if it doesn't make sense to you.
And most importantly, talk to each other.
Yes. Be open-minded.
Yeah.
And try to find like some middle ground.
Good advice.
A little bit. Like I'm going to remember that.
You got it.
Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Crush Talk.
Of course.
Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into like the crazy world of the internet.
Yes.
And remember, be kind to each other out there.
Be kind.
Until next time.
Yeah.